Hello everyone, welcome to another Wednesday webinar. My name is Namai, the tutor, and today we are going to be looking at how to write an effective story opening. Writing an effective story opening is extremely important because when an examiner is marking your story, the first impression that you make is going to help them to judge what level you're at, and they will then be looking for evidence to support that response. So you want to make sure that you make a really good first impression. You want your response to stand out from the get-go. If you put yourself in the examiner's position, they're having to mark thousands and thousands and thousands of scripts. So you want to make sure that you immediately captivate them and that you immediately position yourself as a top grade student. So, as I said, we are looking at how to write an effective story opening. And before we continue, please type in what exam board you are with today. And then that will help me to understand how to help you more specifically as we continue with the webinar. So type in what exam board you are with, whether it's AQA, OCR, Edexcel, or Educas. Okay, so the question that we're working with today is, write about a time something significant changed in your life. So the questions for narrative writing are usually quite broad, and they give you scope to take a story in all manner of ways, really. So it's really there as a prompt. And like I said, you can write about a variety of things. But the main thing I would say for your story is to keep it simple in terms of your plot and your timeline. Because this is a GCSE exam, you're not expected to be writing a novel. Okay, you're writing a short story. And for you to be able to do that well, it's extremely important that you keep your timeline short. So a timeline could be as short as 5 minutes, even up to an hour. I would not go past 24 hours, for example, in terms of the span and the time frame of your story. Okay, I would keep it quite short because of the time that you have in the exam. You're not writing, like I said, you're not being asked to write a novel. So one of the AOs that you'll be judged on or just using, one of the two AOs is AO5, the other one is AO6. And AO5 is all about content and organization. And because we're looking at the story opening, this directly links with the organization aspect of this, because you're thinking about how to start your story well, how to begin well. So it is linking directly with this assessment objective. And specifically in terms of your exam boards, and again, if you can hear me, please type in your exam board. For AQA, for in order to get between 22 to 24 out of 24 marks just for the AO5, they want you to be convincing, compelling, to show sustained crafting of linguistic devices. And we'll be looking at exactly how to do that in your story opening, okay? Edexcel, again, asking you to be able to show that you can manipulate complex ideas. And we're going to be looking at how to do that in our opening. For OCR, it's a bit small, so it refers to sophisticated control. Okay, so we're going to be looking at how to control the information again in our opening in a way that achieves the desired effect in a story opening. Again, the idea of control is conveyed in the Educas mark scheme as well, or referred to in the Educas mark scheme, as they want your writing to be fully coherent and fully controlled, again, to achieve those top marks of 24 for AO5. The idea of control is important, and we're going to be looking at how to do that, how to control the information for the reader in that story opening so we have the impact that we want. So to summarize, you're being asked to write an interesting story told using big words well and organized in a way that puts the message of the story across in a clear and interesting way. And again, we're thinking about that specifically with our story openings and how to have that impact, that compelling impact, and showing that control. So a story opening can be intriguing, can be emotive, can also captivate through beautiful or interesting descriptions. It can also be thought provoking by introducing an interesting, maybe even philosophical idea or concept. Now, I compiled this list as I was looking at some famous story openings and thinking about what makes them good. Okay, so we're going to be reading through these story openings. However, these are taken from novels. Okay, so we're going to be thinking about how we can apply this to an exam, because how Charles Dickens might open a novel, it might not be appropriate for a short story because we might not be able to answer all the questions that might be posed at the beginning of a novel within a short story. So we are using these as inspiration, and we're going to take key points from them, and we're going to be looking at how to use them specifically in an exam. Okay, so we're going to only be taking what we can apply within an exam situation in which you are being asked to write a short story. Okay, so the first story opening is on the screen. Okay, and for this, I would like you to type in 1, 2, 3, or 4 and say what you think the effect is. Okay, so the story opens like this: the man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed. Okay, so that's it. So take a minute or so and think about what you think the effect of that opening is. Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? Is it intriguing? Is it emotive? Is it captivating through beautiful, interesting descriptions? Or is it thought provoking by introducing an interesting idea? So I'll give you 1 minute to type in what you think: 1, 2, 3, or 4. So what do you think the main effect is? Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? Okay, so for this one, I put in intriguing. It's very short, it's just one sentence, but we are left with questions. Okay, and that's what intrigue is: it's creating questions and giving your reader a reason to continue reading. So the takeaway from this is to make sure that you leave your reader with questions. Don't answer every question in your first paragraph, otherwise there's nothing left to reveal as your story continues. But you want to make sure that your reader has some questions, okay, in that opening paragraph that you are left to answer. Okay, so we're going to look at the next example. Okay, and again, think about what is the effect of the story opening. So it reads: it was a wrong number that started it, the telephone ringing 3 times in the dead of night, and the voice on the other end asking for someone he was not. So, what do you think the main effect of the story is? Is it intriguing? Is it emotive? Is it captivating? Or is it thought provoking? So type in 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay, so for this one, I think it's mainly intriguing, okay, because there are lots of questions that we are left with, okay. We don't know who's calling, okay, why they're calling, or why this person who is not the person that was expected to answer the phone is picking up the phone, okay. There are many questions that we're left with here. So this is another example of an intriguing opening. Okay, the next example, this one is a bit longer, okay? So there might be more than one that you spot. Also, bonus is what language techniques have been used? So that's the bonus question. So this reads, Hale knew before he had been in Brighton 3 hours that they meant to murder him. With his inky fingers and his bitten nails, his manner cynical and nervous, anybody could tell he didn't belong to the early summer sun, the cool Whitsun wind of the sea, the holiday crowd. They came in by train from Victoria every 5 minutes, rocked down Queen's Road, standing on the tops of the little local trams, stepped off in bewildered multitudes into fresh and glittering air. The new silver paint sparkled on the piers, the cream houses ran away into the west like a pale Victorian watercolour. A race in miniature motors, a band playing, flower gardens in bloom below the front, an aeroplane advertising something for the health in pale, vanishing clouds across the sky. So again, like I mentioned, this is a much longer opening, and spend maybe 2 minutes now, 2 to 3 minutes, have a look again and think, is this an intriguing opening? Are there any questions that you're left with? In what way, if any, is it emotive? Is it sparking any emotion in you as a reader? Is it captivating through beautiful, interesting descriptions? Is it thought provoking by introducing an interesting idea or concept? So, again, spend a bit more time now, obviously, because it's a longer paragraph, and type in 1, 2, 3, or 4 to express your thoughts about what type of opening this is. Okay, 2 minutes starting now. Okay, 1 minute left. We're very quiet today. Hopefully, you're still um, fully engaged and participating. But again, just think this is just getting you to think about, again, what type of opening is being created here. Because if we can understand how other writers are doing or achieving a specific effect, we can apply it to our own work. So again, you're welcome to share your thoughts about what effect this opening has. Is it intriguing? Is it emotive, captivating, or thought-provoking? 10 more seconds and then I'll show you my thoughts on this one. Okay, so I thought there were quite a few things here. Okay, I've highlighted intriguing, emotive, and captivating. So, in that opening sentence there, right, we're told that they meant to murder him. And again, that's going to leave us with a few questions like, well, why would anyone want to murder this character? Again, that's leaving you with something that leaving you with a question that you want answered. And then the next thing I've highlighted, anybody could tell he didn't belong. So that could possibly be emotive because maybe people might be able to relate to the feeling of not feeling like you belong somewhere. Okay. So that's why I highlighted emotive for that one. The sense of danger with someone wanting to be murdered, that could possibly be viewed as emotive as well, that sense of danger. Then finally, I think there's quite a lot of vivid descriptions of the setting here. I've highlighted the new silver painted sparkled on the piers, the cream houses ran away into the west like a pale Victorian watercolour. That's quite an interesting description, interesting use of visual imagery there. So I think that's quite captivating. That's an example of how your opening can be quite captivating. So the first two that we looked at, they were quite short and sparse on detail, but you can see this one, it's building a picture, it's describing the setting a little bit more, and that's drawing the reader using those descriptions. And that's something that you can think about for your story opening as well. Okay, the next one, this is taken from A White Flag by Jack London, and it reads, dark spruce forest frowned on either side of the frozen waterway. The trees had been stripped by a recent wind of their white covering of frost, and they seemed to lean toward each other, black and ominous in the fading light. A vast silence reigned over the land. The land itself was a desolation, lifeless, without movement, so lone and cold, and the spirit of it was not even that of sadness. There was a hint in it of laughter, but of a laughter more terrible than any sadness. A laughter that was mirthless as the smile of the Sphinx, a laughter cold as the frost and partaking of the grimness of infallibility. It was the masterful and incommunicable wisdom of eternity, laughing at the futility of life and the effort of life. It was the wild, the savage, frozen hearted Northland land wind. Okay, so then again, that's longer. Okay, that's much longer opening, but it's quite an interesting one. So let's think about why that's interesting again. Is it intriguing? Is it emotive? Does it captivate through beautiful or interesting descriptions? Or is it thought provoking by using an interesting idea or concept? So I'll give you a few seconds to just think about this one and then I'll show you what my thoughts were. Okay, so this one, it's quite emotive in parts, especially the idea of a laughter more terrible than sadness. It certainly is captivating through beautiful or interesting descriptions. The descriptions are definitely interesting. We've got that opening line there, using personification. Dark spruce forest frowned on either side of the frozen waterway, and it continues with its use of personification throughout. I think also it's thought provoking by introducing an interesting idea or concept. Okay, um, it's not highlighted, but that final that no the penultimate sentence there, it was the masterful and incommunicable wisdom of eternity, laughing at the futility of life and the effort of life. So you can that's quite a philosophical idea there that's introduced, meaning it's got depth and it's more about meaning in terms of the meaning of life. So that's an interesting idea. So it's thought provoking. So that's something that you can perhaps use in your story opening as well. We'll look at specifically how to do that because you don't want to overdo it. Again, it's a short story that you'll be writing. So when you are introducing maybe a thought provoking idea, you need to make sure that it is linked to what you are writing about, linked very closely to what you're writing about in your story. Okay. So in a way, you can think about your story opening as you're making your reader promises. Okay, you're promising them, you're promising answers to the questions that you create, or you're promising explanations for some of the things that you introduce. And you certainly don't want to overpromise. Okay, you want to be able to fulfill every expectation that you set in your story opening. So, like I said, we are taking inspiration from this. We're not necessarily going to copy and paste the manner in which things are done because these are introductions to longer pieces of work, whereas your exam is a short story that you need to write within 45 minutes. Okay, so the final one is taken from A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. And again, I'm going to give you time to have a look and think about which of the four it falls into. Okay, so have a think about that as I read it. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of life itself. It was the epoch of incredulity. Incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period. That part of its noisiest authorities insisted on its being received for good or for evil, in the superlative degree of comparison only. So that's a bit of a different one compared to some of the ones that we've looked at. But which effects do you think it fits mostly in? Is it intriguing, emotive? Is it captivating? Is it thought provoking? Or what do you think it's trying to be? Even if you don't think, oh, I don't think it's intriguing, I don't think it's captivating, but what do you think it's trying to be? And again, the bonus question here is what language techniques have been used? Okay, so for this one, it's certainly, I would say it's mostly thought provoking and it uses juxtapositions throughout. Okay, and that's what I think creates that thought provoking aspect. It could be considered intriguing as well because of the use of juxtaposition. But I think this is a really good example of how you can introduce an interesting idea or concept, okay, where again, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. How can something be the best of times and be the worst of times? And that links with a lot of things in life where, for example, you might have an important moment, for example, when something happens, like, for example, transitioning from primary school to secondary school, okay? It's a transition that can be both exciting, but also equally scary. So you've got two juxtaposed emotions in one moment or in one event. And that can be said for a lot of events in life. So you can see how this idea is repeated throughout this opening. Okay, so it's a thought provoking opening, it's a thought provoking start to a story, introducing an interesting idea or concept. Okay, so with that, then we can use that as our checklist to think, okay, for our story opening, we want it to be intriguing, so cause the reader to ask questions. We want it to be emotive. We want it to spark some sort of emotion in the reader. We want it to be captivating, and we can do this through beautiful or interesting descriptions. And we want it to be thought provoking as well by introducing an interesting idea or concept. And because we're adapting this for our short story in the exam, we would perhaps just use this in one sentence at a time. Okay. Maybe some of them you might choose, let's say for the captivating through beautiful descriptions, you might want to have two sentences of a beautiful or interesting description of something. But this is how we are going to adapt what we looked at, where Charles Dickens used the whole paragraph using continuous juxtaposition to convey a specific idea or concept. We might just do it in one sentence. Okay. So we're taking what we've compiled from the examples that we've looked at, and we're going to apply it in a way that fits in with what we are expected to do in the exam. So, first of all, you need to think about your plot. Okay. So your plot, like I said, you don't want it to be too grand, because what you want to do, you want to have a simple story, or yeah, a simple story that's emotive, that you can convey within the time that you have. Okay. So for example, it could be a 16-year-old boy narrates the story of the day his best friend got in a fight. Okay. Now, that's an event that would take space within minutes, okay? But you can fit a narrative well around that within the time that you have. Or a 16-year-old girl narrates the story of when her younger sister was born and brought home from the hospital. Again, a baby being brought home from the hospital, that's something that you can convey within hours of it happening, not hours within the exam because you have 45 minutes, but in terms of your time frame of description, okay, is quite is short. So, and I specifically said 16-year-old boy or 16-year-old girl because you want it to be something that's, again, simple, something that's accessible to you as the writer. Okay, it's very important that you write about what you know, okay, to an extent, because that's when you can write well, instead of trying to access an experience that you can't, make reference to in any way. So the first thing that we are going to do now is we are going to write a first paragraph, but this is going to be our first draft. Okay, so yes, we want it to be intriguing and emotive and captivating and thought provoking. However, the first thing that we're doing now is just writing what comes to mind, and then we're going to be editing our first draft to make sure that it is all those things. So the first paragraph that you are going to write for this session in practicing is going to be including what the significant change is, how their life has changed, your character's life, how your character is feeling, and how has their setting changed, okay, or how their setting has changed. So the purpose of this is to get your ideas on the page without too much thought, and then we're going to edit. And the reason why this is important, and we're going through the editing process, is because in the exam, you need to be able to question yourself and think, right, is this as good as it could be? If not, what do I need to change? Okay. So I want you to spend the next 5 minutes writing your opening paragraph. And I want it to be a simple relaying of information. Okay, I'm going to show you an example of mine actually, and then I'll get you to write yours. So I've chosen the plot of the girl narrating her little sister coming home for the first time as a newborn. Okay, so it might read, when my little sister first arrived from the hospital, I felt like I had to fend for myself. My parents were so tired and could hardly keep their eyes open. My sister kept them up all night because she needed constant feeding, and I could hear them making milk for her and trying to calm her down. Our house was now constantly a mess, and there were people round all the time to see the baby. Having a younger sister meant I became a big sister forever. Okay. So that's just me writing it out. Okay. Getting my ideas on the page. And then afterwards, we'll go through the process of looking at every sentence and thinking, is this intriguing? How can we make it intriguing? Is this captivating? How can we make that captivating? Is this emotive? How can we make it emotive? Is it thought provoking? How can we make it thought provoking? And we'll go through that process, okay, in a minute. But for now, I would like you to just write out your paragraph, okay? Get your ideas on the page. Don't think too much at this point in time because we're going to edit in a minute. So I want you to spend the next 5 minutes. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. I'll tell you when we're halfway through. Write your first paragraph, and your 5 minutes starts now. Okay, we're halfway through. So you're writing a story opening, which you will edit using the key points from earlier. So don't get stuck thinking you need to think about, the best metaphor now or the best way of delaying information now. Just put your ideas on the page and then we'll edit it afterwards. 2 minutes left. Okay, just under 20 seconds left, and then we'll move on to editing. If you would like me to give you feedback on what you've written, then you can add your story opening to the comments. Okay, so as I read out to you already, that's what a story opening might look like. So we're now going to edit, okay, and we're going to think about how to create intrigue. So starting with the opening sentence, okay, I want us to think about what information can be removed to create intrigue. So remember our first bullet point from our checklist was intriguing, okay? You want your story to be intriguing. You want your reader to have questions. So this sentence, when my little sister arrived from the hospital, I felt like I had to fend for myself, okay? We can edit that. Let me remove that banner. And remove some information, and it just reads, I felt like I had to fend for myself. So because we've removed that information, the reader's left with the question, why? Okay, why was this person feeling like they had to fend for themselves? So we're immediately creating some intrigue there. So have a look at your opening sentence. Have you blatantly stated what's happened? And could you remove some of that information and for leave some information that creates those questions, creates that intrigue? So I'll give you 60 seconds, 1 minute, review your first sentence. Is there something that you can change, like I did with mine, to create intrigue? So you've got 1 minute starting now. Just looking at that very first sentence. That was mine before, and this is it now. Okay, so that's the first sentence. And again, the reason why we're looking at it sentence by sentence, if you remember the mark scheme that we looked at, some of the words, the key words were controlled, sustained, compelling, crafted. Okay, so you want to make sure that you are able to make sure every sentence is working towards giving you a mark, not just any mark, giving you those top grade marks. Okay, and to do that, you need to show that crafting. So that's what we're doing here by looking at sentence by sentence, thinking about how we can improve it. It's that crafting and showing that control. Okay, so because we have removed that information now, again, that's showing a sense of control in your writing because you are delaying that information, therefore creating that intrigue. Okay, so the next sentence now. My parents were so tired and could hardly keep their eyes open. So I want you to look at your second sentence and think about how you can convey what you have, the information that you're putting across in a more interesting way. Okay, so think about maybe a language technique that you can use: metaphor, simile, personification, in order to communicate in an interesting way. So the example for mine, instead of just saying my parents were so tired they could hardly keep their eyes open, I've put my parents were the living dead. Okay, so we've got the use of a metaphor there. Okay, the fact that they were so tired, they were like zombies, basically. Okay, So I've used the metaphor there and I've joined those two sentences there as well because I think it works better that way. So, what can you do for your second sentence to make it more interesting? So, spend 1 minute having a look at that and then we'll continue. 1 minute starting now. Okay, so hopefully you've improved your second sentence. So, like I said with mine, I've joined mine as so I've added a metaphor and I've also joined it with my first sentence. Okay, right, moving on to the next one. So for this one, at the moment it reads, my sister kept them up all night because she needed constant feeding and I could hear them making milk for her and trying to calm her down. So for this part, how can we make this more interesting? Let's think about how maybe we can make it more captivating by using language techniques like onomatopoeia or metaphors. Because again, this is our story opening. We want to create that good first impression. So for your next sentence, have a read of your next sentence. If you want me to give you feedback on yours, you can type in. You can type in your sentence, and I can give you some feedback for that. But have a look at your next sentence. So I'll show you what I did for this one. Okay. So instead of just saying it in a straightforward way that they were up all night, feeding her, making her milk and trying to calm her down. Okay, I've written night was day and day was night. I could hear the kettle boiling at all hours of the night, along with the constant attempts to pacify her. They thought I was asleep, but I heard everything. Shh, shh. They would plead, but the tyrant never listened. So, for this sentence, to improve it, instead of just telling my reader, I am showing them. Okay, so this might be something you might be familiar with from school, where you're told to show, not tell. So you're showing your reader what's happening. So when I talk about hearing the kettle boiling and hearing the shushing sounds, okay, and the pleading, that's showing, okay. And then I've also used the metaphor, refer to the baby as a tyrant, okay. So that could be that's a more interesting way of putting across the way when babies are born, they do tend to run the show, and everyone's life revolves around the baby. Okay, so I've used that the word the adjective not the adjective, the noun tyrant there to create that metaphor. Okay, so if you look at yours now, spend a minute again, review your next sentence, okay, and think about how can you show, instead of just telling, okay, how can you show the reader what you are saying, what you are conveying, how can you show them? And also, what language techniques can you use? I've used onomatopoeia with the shushing, and I've used the metaphor, the tyrant, okay, referring to the baby as a tyrant. So I'll give you another minute again. Have a look at your next sentence. How can you improve your next sentence? Okay, 1 minute is up and we're nearly there. Okay, so hopefully you've had a look at yours, okay, and you've been able to make some changes to improve that sentence to make it more interesting, more captivating. Okay, moving on to the next sentence. So this is now focusing more on the setting, okay? So our house was now constantly a mess and there were people around all the time to see the baby. So there you need to consider how, again, we can make that description more interesting. So thinking carefully about adjectives, okay? The house was a mess. Can we add to that? Okay. People were around to see the baby all the time. Is there something that we can say more about that? Is there a way in which we could describe that to make it more interesting, more captivating? So for this one, our once pristine and peaceful home had become a buzz with a relentless influx of guests arriving to pay homage to our new ruler. So I've used alliteration, pristine and peaceful, to describe what the house was like before, okay? And the house has now become a buzz, okay, with a relentless influx of guests. And then I've extended my metaphor, okay, of the baby being a tyrant, okay, and the guests are arriving to pay homage to our new ruler, okay. So I extended that metaphor again, adding um, making it more interesting by using that language technique of an extended metaphor, okay? So look at your next sentence, okay? Or wherever you've described setting, think about the adjectives that you've chosen, okay, to describe your setting, and think about how you can maybe extend the metaphor that you introduced earlier or use a metaphor now if you haven't already done so. So looking at your next sentence, 1 minute again, starting now. Sorry about that. I pressed something. Um, that's the timer. Sorry. Okay, going back to the slides. Okay, so we had just looked at the penultimate sentence, okay? Adding maybe an extended, like my example, I added an extended metaphor, and I think more carefully about my adjectives to convey the change that had happened. Okay, finally, add some depth to your final sentence by referring to a well-known saying, sorry, there's a typo there, about change and linking it with events in your story. Okay, so for this part, you can Google search a saying about change and link it with your plot. That's what I did for mine. So remember when we read specifically the Charles Dickens one, the Charles Dickens opening, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And using that concept, the idea of juxtaposed feelings being present in one moment or one event, okay? So that's what we're doing for this one. So how that could look, for example, they say change. Oh, let me remove that banner. So how I've done it for mine, they say change is the only constant, and this change brought an irreversible constant in my life, Jane Marie, my little sister. Okay, so we've got finally, okay, the revelation of this change. There's been hints, obviously, with the parents waking up at night, shushing, okay, boiling the kettle. But now I've explicitly told my reader, okay, and answered the question about what this change was, okay. And the saying that I've referred to is the one that I've put in quotes: change is the only constant, okay. And I've linked it with what's happening in my story. So have a look at your final sentence and see how you can add some depth again to this. For this specific part, you are maybe trying to make it thought provoking, okay, in a way that links maybe to the reader's experience and adding some depth to your story, okay? So 1 minute starting now. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to do that for your final sentence, adding some depth, okay, to your story opening, making it thought provoking, which is again helps you create an interesting story opening and an effective story opening. So this is the final Wednesday webinar for a while because I'm now fully booked on Wednesdays. However, if you would like to join one of my groups, I have a Key Stage 3 group on Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. I also have a GCSE Mastery group on Thursdays from 5 to 6 p.m. I only have one space left for the GCSE writing group on Thursdays if you wanted to join that one. And I have an 11 plus group for younger students, and I have 2 spaces left for that one. Okay, so if you wanted to join any of those, then you can email me. I only have 5 students in each group for all my groups. And like I said, for the Wednesday webinars, there won't be any for a while now because I am fully booked on Wednesdays. So there won't be one next week. There won't be one for, like I said, there won't be one for a while. But you can join one of my other groups, and you can just contact me via email, or you can book at www.lanithertutor.com. That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you at some point this year. Bye.